Hey everyone, it's another episode of Cinema Crusaders, and I'm so glad you're here because on this episode, you have tuned in either because you have a newfound respect for life or you really love the movie that we're going to talk about today, which is Grosse Pointe Blank. I love this movie. I'm really looking forward to talking to it. But before we get to that, I'm going to introduce my co host for today's podcast. I want to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, the man who is currently doing commissions right now. So check him out on DeviantArt. I'm going to let him do a shout out for himself. That is none other than Jeff Bracey. How you doing, Jeff?
Popcorn. Hey, thanks so much for the plug, man. I really appreciate that. If you guys are out there looking for some commission artwork, I do. It's all digital, mind you, but it's pencils, pen and inks, full color. Comic book style art, and I also do digital painting, and you can find examples of my artwork at DeviantArt under Bracey 100. So thanks again for the plug. It's been
what is that again?
Bracey 100 at DeviantArt. You can throw the link up there because you are a boss.
Yep. Here we go. Let's see. Does that look right?
That looks right.
All right, cool. So go check that out. Some great commissions. Get you some great work. I've seen examples of Jeff's artwork, so definitely go check that out. DeviantArt, Bracey 100. And he'll set you up for all your artwork. So, Grosse Pointe Blank. Let's jump right into this. So, just to summarize Grosse Pointe Blank, last time out we talked about Heathers, and I kind of wanted to do this movie next because from a certain point of view, you could almost see JD, especially if he didn't have his psychopathic parents that father he did, growing up to be Martin Blank, where the only difference I'd say is that Martin had a little bit better control of himself and decided to join the army when he realized he wanted to kill people. So but the whole point of Grosse Pointe Blank is that John Cusack plays Martin Blank, who is an assassin for hire, and his 10-year high school reunion is coming up. And he's having doubts about his work. He's having a crisis of faith in what he does for a living. And there's a bunch of other side plots that we'll get into a little bit more. But suffice to say, he goes back to find the girl he left behind. And he left her standing or sitting on her steps on prom night and went and joined the army and then became an assassin. And he goes back to Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and a bunch of things ensue. It's a really dark comedy, but there's a lot of deep stuff in the movie as well that we can get into. A lot of deep examinations of what it's like going back to your 10-year reunion. If any of you haven't experienced that before, or going back to any reunion, stuff talking about examining life and the feelings we have, and Alan Arkin plays a psychiatrist who's great. So we'll get into all that, but that's a brief summary. I'm going to kick it over to Jeff real quick if you want to add anything that stood out before we get right into the meat and potatoes of everything.
Yeah, there's so many great themes in this film. The fact of like the sort of, even though he's not middle-aged, the midlife crisis sort of thing. Like you said, the very crisis of faith that he has. In some weird way, it's Martin Blank is growing up. He's been a little bit of a man-child in a way because he's been very selfish in his pursuits. And the fact that you can never go home, but sometimes going home is exactly what you need.
Right. And we'll definitely get into that. I would like to draw some parallels that I saw in Heathers as we go through, because I think there are some, and I think it's interesting how you see the difference between Martin Blank and JD. And I think a lot of that has to do with the different dysfunction that Martin's parents had versus JD's parents. So, but it kind of produced the same child to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Just different aspects. So it's an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah. So is this JD if he had stayed with his mother instead of his father?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a great example. I also thought it was interesting. One of the things I want to hit on is that looking back, this movie came out for everybody watching. This movie came out in 1997. So this movie is what are we looking at? 24 years old, which is crazy to think of because I remember reading about this movie in the Airplane magazine while I was going to a contract job somewhere. That sounds horrible. I was going to do a consulting job, so a contract job. Sounds like I'm going to.
That still makes you sound like a hired killer.
All right, I was going to do a job somewhere.
Still a killer.
Yeah. So yeah, but I remember reading about this movie and thinking, oh, I got to check that out. So and the fact that was probably 25 something years ago. So
I gotta make one more Killer Jick reference. Hey, yeah. Nemesis.
Yeah.
Are you working?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a good night.
Sure. I'm not sure where we're going with this one.
That's a John Wick reference.
Oh, okay. John Wick. That's another one. We got to wait for that movie to be 10 years old.
Yeah, like he's I forget the actor name's like a bald black guy asked him that when John's just off to his boss.
Oh,
working tonight?
Yes.
Has it been a good night? And he's like, oh, unfortunately. They start shooting each other.
Who's a legitimate martial artist. I know who you're talking about now.
Yeah, Keanu started out as not knowing a thing and became the real deal. Speaking of which, so is John Cusack, and I can't wait to get into that part too.
Yeah. The bald guy that you're talking about in John Wick, though, he is a legitimate martial artist, and he's part Japanese, and he knows a lot of. He did a bit on Musashi. He did a documentary on Musashi once, but
I can't remember his blasted name right now, so I'm sorry out there.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's incredible. So anyway, we digress, but back to this movie. So as always, what we're going to do is we're going to break this down. We'll start off talking about the way the movie's shot. We can also talk about the plot and some of the stuff they did there, the subplots and things like that. And then we'll get into the individual characters and the actors and actresses who played them, because I know we have a lot to say about them. I mean, I want to talk about Minnie Driver specifically because I think she's great in this as well. And then we will give our thoughts about if this movie translates to a modern audience and give our score. So that's our general Cinema Crusaders format we always follow, and we'll be doing that again. So let's go ahead and get right into all of the technical aspects of this film. So the plot, so as far as the writing, the cinematography, anything that stands out that way. And let's go ahead. Let's do 2 rounds on this one. So let's save the writing and that kind of stuff for the second round. And let's go anything that stands out for you from the technical production side on this movie.
Let's see. I did think the movie was well shot, and it's a comedy action, but it's not shot like an action film. That was very apparent. There's a couple of scenes that have some intense action, but they don't follow the action tropes that we see in modern movies, or I don't feel like even in movies of the 90s so much. It has its own sort of feel to it, even the action aspects. I was very aware of that, having been I'm a huge action film buff. But it all kind of works because it doesn't feel jarring when you cut from the drama to the action. Mm-hmm. So for me, the comedy, the drama, and the action all flow very seamlessly in the way that it's shot. So my hat's off to the cinematographer and the director for the way they handled that. And I guess in a bizarre context, it adds a certain realism to something that's kind of absurd in a lot of ways, because Martin Blank's predicament is very absurd. The fact that he's going to his high school reunion and he tells everybody he's a hired killer. And of course, nobody believes him because of how he took off and left town. And so it just, the action scenes really punctuate this almost rom-com kind of setup, rom-com / sitcom. And it's punctuated by these moments of intense violence. But it's all done so tastefully that it just flows seamlessly.
I think that's a great point you bring up there, because George Armitage, who directed this, he's not really known for anything else other than this. In fact, I don't think this movie is that well known. It's kind of a cult classic. But I have never seen anything else he's done. But this, I think, really seamlessly blends, like you were talking about, the action into a movie that really is a dark comedy and kind of a rom-com, like you said. I mean, there's elements of that. But when it does have the action sequences, I'm thinking specifically of a fight sequence that John Cusack has is shot really well, and that is not an easy thing to do, as you and I both know, because we like to follow, stunt choreography and everything. It's really easy to not catch, to make it look just like you shot a couple scenes and then just kind of put it together. It flows really well. It looks like something out of a genuine action flick. But then there were also some big budget action scenes, like the fight in the Ultimart that ultimately ends up blowing up. I mean, that is big budget action there, including a huge explosion and everything, and it's done well.
Yeah, I really like. I like a lot of the angles and everything, and thinking about, like I said, it doesn't seem to fit with any particular decade of action. Specifically, when I look at the fight scene in between the lockers in the school hallway, if you were shooting this back in Jackie Chan's heyday or now, you would have a lot of wide shots to really show the action. And because John Cusack is trained in martial arts, he's not using a stunt double. You get to see his face the whole time. As a matter of fact, the guy he fights is Benny the Jet Urquidez, a world champion kickboxer and martial artist, the first guy to go over to Thailand and prove that a non-Thai could whoop the crap out of Thai boxers if they were just badass enough. He's actually the guy who trained John Cusack in martial arts. He got him into kickboxing.
And I will say to everyone out there, even if you don't watch this movie, find the high school hallway fight from Grosse Pointe Blank on YouTube and watch it, because it's an incredible mixed martial art fight. It's not just kickboxing in it. And then the method of execution that Martin Blank uses is just incredibly inventive.
And it's a great setup for that, because it's something that happens when he gets to the prom that gives him the weapon of opportunity. So the film is beautifully set up, but that fight scene, instead of like doing a John Wick style, like lots of long shots, the director pulls in like a lot of tight mediums, which is kind of surprising because Benny's barely 5 feet tall. He's a really short guy, and they pull in mediums, but they pull out wide to get these nice impact shots, like the kicking the guy into the lockers, or showing Benny doing a great dragon tail sweep to take John's legs out from underneath him.
Let me introduce this whole thing real quick so we can hit some more on what you were talking about. This is one of the geniuses of this movie, is that there's a lot of dark comedy and irony in it. So Martin Blank, John Cusack, gets to the prom and he meets one of his former classmates who's now a lawyer, and he's going to give him a card, but he gives him the pin, because he's trying to sell the guy. It's the thing that happens at reunions and stuff. And we could talk a little bit about that later. So he's got this pin, and he's like, "Oh, thank you." He puts it in there. This whole fight happens, great fight. And then eventually Martin Blank comes out on top, and then to kill him, he uses the pin and jabs it into the guy's throat. We're talking, the same thing as Joe Pesci did in Goodfellas, when he killed the guy.
Also thinking about like Jason Bourne, when he, the improvised fight where he has to pull out a pin against a guy who's got a punch dagger.
Yeah.
A great use of improvised weapons. And I actually love the shot. It's one of my favorite shots in the film, where he pulls out the pin and he's got to flick the cap off with his thumb before he sticks him in the neck.
Yeah. And then to top it off, to give you an idea of how this movie comes full circle, they pay off the whole situation, because after they dispose of the body and everything, and I should have given a spoiler alert, but after they dispose of the body, they come back down to the reunion, and the guy's sitting there drinking, and the reunion is broken up, and people are going there. So it's there's a few stragglers leading there, and he's bleeding and got ice on his head and everything. And he looks at the guy as he's about to leave, and he's like, "That's a great pin you gave me," walks out. So they pay off the whole situation. So that dark comedy is there.
The script for this film is really sharp, and I know we'll get into the writing later, but just for me, that's the action pieces are really the highlight of the film. Even though it's this whole existential crisis wrapped up in a rom-com, wrapped up with assassins. But even though the climactic fight is great, the hallway fight is always the thing that stands out most for me of the film. Mm-hmm. It's a real turning point in the movie.
Yeah, and it gets, because to be honest with you, and this is me being perfectly honest, the film is dragging just a little bit when it gets to that point. It's like we know that the where we're going is always towards this reunion, and so it's like I think they might have been able to cut 5 minutes of some of the other stuff out and gotten us to the reunion sooner. So, I mean, I think that is a legitimate critique of the movie. I think from the technical aspect, for me, there's two things that I really wanted to talk about. Technically, the movie is shot perfectly fine. It doesn't stand out, but it's not bad either. It's just professional. It's professional. The things that stood out for me was, one is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is
great soundtrack from the 80s.
Absolutely incredible. Not to mention that I don't even know how they got this passed. They got permission to do this, but the Violent Femmes is the lead-in song, or not the lead-in song. It's the song the outro song. Violent Femmes, Blister in the Sun. But you got Faith No More in there. You got the Clash. You've got just so much good 80s music in it. It's an absolutely amazing soundtrack. So the music is worth the price of admission all by itself. Then on top of that, somebody did their homework, and also on methods of assassination, because usually you would just see guns, but there are so many different, in the beginning you see Martin Blank, and things just keep going wrong for him. He's doing his job and he's not enjoying it. But there's one time where he's using a sniper rifle to kill an assassin, and then another assassin shows up, so that becomes a whole problem. Then you find out that he accidentally killed some rich dude's dog because the dog grabbed a piece of dynamite, and was retrieving it, blew up. Yeah. So, that's part of his problem. And then another time he broke into an apartment above another guy. So in his sleep, he's trying to put poison down to kill the guy. Just some really interesting things.
I really like seeing that, because that was a nice nod to an old James Bond film with Sean Connery, the method of killing somebody in their sleep by dripping poison down a thread after you've drilled from the ceiling down into the room. I was like, oh yeah, that was great.
It makes me so happy that you do that reference. Of course you do. You're Bracey. You know all this stuff. You only live twice. Great movie. Absolutely great movie. And some incredibly good lines.
It was so great because the whole thing is foiled in the same way. The guy he's supposed to kill rolls over just like Bond rolls over, and the poor Bond girl bites it because she gets the poison.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, and then he kills the dude. Yeah, but there's some great lines in that movie too. And You Only Live Twice is one of the great James Bond movies. If you've never seen it, go check it out. Maybe we'll do a James Bond movie sometime. So so for the technical aspect, I love that. I love that they brought in the kickboxing, and they brought in killing the guy with the pin. And then also the last thing I'll say on that is that they did their homework as far as people who work with weapons for a living, no matter who it is. If it's a secure, I don't know any assassins, but security people, things like that, they have their case. They have their go case of their weapons and everything. They take care of them because those are the tools of your trade. And so when Martin gets into his tool case at one point, it looks real. I've never seen an assassin's tool case. I hope never to, but it was believable to me. It absolutely felt real. It didn't feel hokey or anything. So,
dude, I just realized something. This is the
Yep.
prequel to John Wick.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's like, he's a professional assassin. He meets the love of his life. He quits the business.
Oh my God, it really
It's
is.
the prequel to John Wick.
It is. Martin Blank is John Wick. He's the Baba Yaga. Oh my Lord. Wow. Now there's a fan theory we got to get out there. Holy mackerel. It really is. You just blew my mind.
All they need is the dog.
Yep. Well, and she could get in the dog later. Oh
Yep.
man. Poor Mini Driver, she's dead. All right. So let's do round 2 here. Let's get to the writing, because I think the writing deserved a mention all of its own. We've already hit a little bit on it, but
really movie.
Yeah. And there are a lot of moving pieces here. It's a very complicated movie. I do know some people who have had to watch it 2 or 3 times to catch everything that's going on, because everybody in this movie is orbiting around Martin Blank, but everybody who is orbiting around Martin Blank is feeding into his neurosis or his eventual healing in one way or another. So every character. And the character that I think best exemplifies that, the 2 characters that are written, I think the best to exemplify the exasperation that Martin Blank has versus the Alan Arkin, who really is one side of Martin Blank's brain, and then the receptionist, his receptionist, played by his sister Joan Cusack, is the other side of Martin Blank's brain. You know, and if you really want to get deep into it and start doing like the English paper type thing, when the office is shut down and he realizes he no longer needs Alan Arkin, that is when Martin Blank is healed, because he's, and those 2 parts of him are gone, and he's become a person again. But the writing, especially for Alan Arkin, who plays a psychiatrist, I can't wait till we talk about the individual characters. He is just absolutely great, and him in that role is fantastic. So, and Joe Cusack is a certifiable psychopath who is the receptionist, and I can't wait till we talk about her as well. So, but that's what I saw, is that the writing is so clever, and not in a trite way, clever in a good way, in showing you all of the elements that lead into this broken person who's Martin Blank. Absolute crazy, really good.
This is such a smart script, and I can't believe I didn't see it like that before, but you're absolutely right. The therapist and his receptionist are the 2 halves of his psyche at war. And the interesting thing is the receptionist equals his professional side. She's got no compunctions about working for a killer. She's all business. She's very professional. And you do see that from Martin early on, when he's still on his game, even when he's dealing with Dan Aykroyd early on, he snakes his assassination, thwarts it. She's the professional side, and yet she's also that little Jiminy Cricket kind of voice, like, hey, your high school reunion's coming up. Don't you want to do that? So now that you've given me that perspective, I totally see this aspect of her being that inner voice, like the inklings of the conflict that he's going to just rapidly devolve into. And I was going to add, though, you also see that inner rage that's in there that could come out, that led to him being, because there's a scene where Joan Cusack is on the phone. She starts screaming at the lady.
Yeah, and it's she's a psycho.
She's talking about a recipe or something, and she's on the phone with somebody else at the same time. I told you we gotta have these bullets. Don't you? She's cussing up a storm. No, it's fine.
Yeah. And then eventually she's
going on, and then Arkin comes out with that whole thing. Is he's going on oh, I feel bad about this whole thing, and he's like, well, maybe it's the fact that you kill a lot of people, and he tries to rationalize it to himself. I don't care about morality. If I'm at your door, you probably did something to deserve it. But he knows better. He knows better. And it just come to a head for him.
And he makes that realization at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing I'll add on writing too is that there are just so many clever lines from a variety of different characters that are giving you glimpses into what is wrong. What with Martin Blank? Like at one point, he goes back to find his mother. His house is gone. It's been turned into a convenience store.
Oh, and how brilliant was that?
Yeah,
and I love that whole scene where he's like, "What are you doing here?" Talking to the poor clerk. It was like, I just
and so there's a great line in there where he calls Oatman, who is the psychiatrist. He's like, "You could never go home again, but evidently you could shop there." And it's like, for anybody, as you get older, that happens to all of us to a certain extent. It's like your hometown changes, and you go back, and things are gone, and it's a weird feeling. So there's that element, but then there's also, he goes to visit his mother. So he was giving his mother money to save the house, and she's in an insane asylum. She's pretty far out there. And at one point, his mother looks at him and says, and doesn't recognize him, and goes, "You're a handsome devil. What's your name?" So it seems like it's just a line to illustrate how far gone his mother is. Well, but later on, I was going to real quickly add this.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah. Later on, Martin Blank, who is having a lot of anxiety about being in a social situation and going to the prom and everything, the prom. I keep wanting to say prom, the reunion. Yeah. And he doesn't know, he's trying to figure out who he is. He's having a crisis of identity. He's sitting there tightening his tie, and he looks in the mirror and repeats that line: "You're a handsome devil. What's your name?" It's just
he ends up doing that a couple of times. And you might as well say this is his prom, because he never did make his prom. So for him, this is prom. But this also speaks to one of his sins, the sin of the fact that he left town as he realizes he has all this rage, and he doesn't want to inflict it on the person that he loves the most. He realizes we don't know precisely why he's so angry. We don't see a father in the picture. We find that his mother. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we do know what part of why he's so angry is that we see in one scene, his father died a couple months before the prom, and he was an alcoholic. So
okay, you're right. I'd forgotten that, but we see that, and we see his mother's trouble. So what does he do? He runs away, and he never looks back. Now he sends his mother money, but money wasn't what his mother needed. What his mother needed was him.
Right.
And he comes back surprised to find all the changes when, again, this is one more thing that's unfortunately his fault. That if he'd been there, maybe something could have happened for her in his home.
And it's really interesting. The last thing I'm going to say on the writing is, like Heathers, this movie is a dark comedy, and it had to be a dark comedy, because if it wasn't, it would be a really depressing movie. Really depressing. As it is, it's a very entertaining movie, but there's some really serious stuff going on here. So
what I'll say about the movie is, I love you were able to see the evolution of his character throughout the piece. And like I said, the writing is so smart in all these things. Like he runs into Jeremy Piven, who just kind of goes back into dude bro mode, like, "Hey man, nice to meet you." And then all of a sudden, just explosively, because people react to his being there, even though like, "Oh, I thought you died, thought you were in a cult," because he just ran off with no explanation, never looked back. And then he just blows like, 10 years, man, where the hell have you been? 10 years. And they just go on, and they apparently he was likable enough that people just keep accepting him being back. Even Minnie Driver's dad is kind of like, "Oh, okay, you're here. We'll see how things go."
Mm-hmm.
But I love, you see his evolution through them as well as himself. Some people saying he hasn't changed, which bothers him greatly, because he feels like he has changed, and he is changing. And I think one of the pivotal moments is all of these things he ran away from accumulate. It's punctuated by the fight in the hallway, but it accumulates when one of his schoolmates hands him her baby. And there's this really fascinating moment. She's talking about, people think that being married isn't, is a loss of freedom, but it's not. It's even more freeing. and he's sitting there and he has this deep soulful look with this baby, and it's a great setup of the shot between the expressions of the baby and himself, and you can see something clicking over in his head. Something is irrevocably changing.
And the music that goes along with that is
yes. Again, the music is so great in here to punctuate things.
It's a great song, and I'm blanking on what it is at the moment, but it really works well.
Well, I love like when you were talking about Faith No More. I love how they put in the song "We Care a Lot," and I thought that really added a certain amount. And the song choices are perfect. But like you said, the music for the scene and everything, and you just feel like a switch has been clicked.
I'm hearing it in my head. It's a David Bowie song, and I can't remember the name. Under Pressure.
Yes, Under Pressure.
Yeah, David Bowie and Queen. So
because he is under pressure.
Oh, it's not just Queen. Yeah.
He's feeling all these pressures, and he keeps putting off this assassination that he's supposed to be here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like everything is just clicking down. The timer is clicking down, and something about this baby, he sees potential possibilities that he hadn't seen for himself in 10 years.
And it's almost like he's reconnecting with humanity through that baby right there.
Got a newfound respect for life.
Yeah, that was the joke I said at the beginning. There's a moment where Dan Aykroyd is wondering why he's not killing this, and we'll get into who he's supposed to kill when we talk about the characters, but he's not killing the guy. He's like, he either has a newfound respect for life or he's in love with that guy's daughter. So, I think that's a great segue, what you were talking about, right into let's talk about characters and the actors or actresses that played them. So let's start with the minor characters. So we'll leave out, John Cusack and Minnie Driver and Alan Arkin, but talk about those secondary characters, the Jeremy Pivens or the guy who played the lawyer, those characters. What stood out for you from those characters?
One of my favorite moments is actually that guy in high school who was always super obnoxious, and he grew up to still be super obnoxious. The bully, the jock guy. He's the Mercedes dealer. And he's like, "Oh man, yeah, you want to do some blow, man?" He's the guy like beat up all these kids in school. And then when John confronts him, like, "Do you think there's still some you and me between now and 10 years ago?" And the guy has this kind of breakdown, and he's all drunk and everything. He pulls out a poem because he's got this secret, sensitive side that he's kept hidden for his whole life. And he's like, "These are my words."
Mm-hmm.
That was so great. I love that scene so much.
And John is like, mind blown. He's just, but yeah, the guy is really looking for something. It's pretty incredible.
So funny because John actually heals him, just as John himself, as Martin needs healing, he heals this character by giving him this moment, even though he really doesn't want anything to do with him. Mm-hmm. And he's, this is a guy who you probably 6 months ago he'd have just beat the crap out of at best and left in the gutter and walked off.
Yeah. Exactly. And the interesting thing about that scene is that Minnie Driver is watching him the whole time.
Yes.
And that's kind of where she decides that he's, it's interesting because it's building her up to want to be in a relationship with him. Yeah. And then immediately crashes back down when reality hits again because Martin Blank is forced to kill somebody who's trying to kill him. And she.
Oh, and what a great setup to all of that. Film is so doggone smart.
Yeah. And it takes you through the highs and lows of this. And another character just like this is Jeremy Piven.
Yes.
Character. I talk about him. Jeremy Piven's character, I mean, he's the friend. And it's interesting because, like you alluded to before, Martin Blank is completely honest with everybody. They keep asking what he's doing, and he's like, contract killer. And everybody thinks he's joking. And he's not. And he's generally confused because he's expecting people to look at him like a monster. And everyone thinks he's just joking around. And so that scene where he ends up killing the guy in the hallway, above what's going on, above the reunion, Debbie, who is played by Minnie Driver, comes around, sees it, and freaks out. And she takes off running. She's screaming. And here's the best part, is that Jeremy Piven knows something's off with his friend. And when Debbie comes running down the stairs and is freaking out, and Jeremy Piven's there, and he's like, where's our boy? Where's our boy? Immediately, I flash to the point is Jeremy Piven thinks that his boy just committed suicide.
Yeah.
He killed him. And he runs up there and instead finds his friend standing over a dead body, and he helps his friend dispose of the dead body in the furnace. And then as they're walking into the prom and that scene with the reunion, and the scene with the pin, the final scene with the pin happens a little bit later, but he looks at him, Jeremy Piven looks at him and says, "Hi, I'm whatever my name was. I'm in real estate. What do you do for a living?" And it's like, for the first moment, that is just an incredible scene, because it's like, it's almost like him, the realization, everything has crushed out on Martin Blank, and Martin Blank now has to look at himself, and Jeremy Piven is being Martin Blank and saying, "Hi, I'm a normal person. What do you do for a living?" It's just incredible writing. So good.
And yet it's like, I like Piven's character so much, because you can take into account that, like, maybe the shock of the situation, he just kind of rolls with it for a second. But, he doesn't go off to the cops. He doesn't do that. He's Jeff Foxworthy had this great line about, like, or maybe it was Jeff Foxworthy or Ron White, one of those two, had a great line about, like, your best friend is the guy who bailed you out of jail. It's like, no, your real best friend is sitting in there with you going like, well, she didn't look like a cop, did she? That sort of thing. And, he helps him dispose of a body. And immediately after, he asks him, making no judgments after making that pronouncement, he says, like, so what now? Chase down the girl? So he's basically asking him, what are you going to choose to do, John? Or Martin, what are you going to choose to do?
Yeah. And it really is just incredible. And this whole movie is full of those little moments throughout the whole thing. I mean, it doesn't matter what character you go to. The other two, minor characters that I wanted to talk about were, one was played, I don't remember who the one was played by, but the other was played by Hank Azaria.
Yes.
Lardner.
One of the two feds.
Yeah, and then there's another guy who's a fed, and I can't find his name. If I find it, I will mention him.
Let's
McCullers.
See,
Todd Freeman.
Todd Freeman. It wasn't no, he wasn't a Saturday Night Live. No.
Yeah, I don't know.
God, my words.
I'm not sure what he's been in, but this is just another layer of complexity of this. Dan Aykroyd, who we haven't talked about at all, he's in this movie as well. Dan Aykroyd puts a counterterrorism Fed unit. He tips them off to Martin Blank, and so these two are in there to try and catch Martin Blank in the act of assassinating him, so they can assassinate him. But some of the dialogue between these two is just so witty. Like at one point, not Hank Azaria's character, but the other character, they're getting tired of waiting for Martin Blank to do the assassination. So the one character is like, why don't we just do his job so that we could do our job? And Hank Azaria
has his whole diatribe about how you be the good guy.
Yeah, he's like, you got to let the bad guys do their job so that we can kill him, and then we'll be the good guys. And so the guy basically looks at him and sums up, and he goes, so what you're saying is that if he kills those guys, he's the bad guy, right? And then when we kill him, we're the good guys, right? And he's like, right. He's like, I can live with that.
You know who those two remind me of? They remind me very much of Giles and oh God, what's Travolta's character's name from Pulp Fiction? Their conversations remind me of those two so much, and this feels like that kind of Tarantino-esque dialogue, because they have these wonderful intellectual conversations, these philosophies about life and what they're doing in the moment, and they're just great supporting characters for that reason.
Well, even you're absolutely right. I was about to say the same thing. I mean, that is a great compliment too to this movie, is that the dialogue is Tarantino-esque. It really is. Like, there's at one point where
you want to know my favorite line in the flick?
What's that?
When he goes to get Minnie Driver for the reunion, like it's prom all over again, and he has to face her dad after breaking his little girl's heart 10 years ago. And so, his dad's making these pronouncements. Oh, I thought you'd be some sort of burnout hippie. He's like, oh, no, I get six figures. I'm, working. He's like, so what do you do? He's like, contract killer. And he just, because nobody believes, and he takes a drink like, well, good for you. It's a growth industry.
Exactly. It's so just so smart. I mean, and I was even going to bring up the point with the Tarantino lines when the two government spooks are following him up as he's driving to Grosse Pointe. They're talking, and the one agent keeps saying about, I met Martin Blank once. He's like, you never met Martin Blank.
Yes.
But the back and forth and the way they're talking, I was expecting them to talk about a Royale with cheese.
Yes.
So it's really, really good. Really good dialogue.
Vincent Vega, that's the other character.
Yeah. I mean, and it really does have that feel. You're absolutely right. It's like if those two worked for the government, it would be, it would have been those two.
It makes it in hindsight, it makes me wish I could see a movie where these two agents were after Giles and Vega.
Yeah, it would have been great.
they're on the opposite sides of the fence, but they're the same people.
It's funny because I think this movie came out after Pulp Fiction, but now I'm thinking about the way that those two agents die, and it's also very Tarantino-esque. It's like it's really weird. It really is. Okay, so let's get into some of the main characters then, because I know that we're going to have a lot to say about each of these, and there's some really good ones. So let's start with the guy we haven't hit at all, and I want you to just hit this guy first, and that is Grosser, who is a competing assassin who is played by Dan Aykroyd. So with that said, I'm going to kick it over to you to let you talk about this character.
Dan Aykroyd, something that I was reminded about when I watched this film that I hadn't really connected to before. And there is I feel like certain amounts of this is going to be Dan Aykroyd ad-libbing. Because when you've got Dan Aykroyd on your film, let him do what he wants to do. He's going to follow the script, but he's also going to give you moments of gold if you just let him do his thing. And so there's a part in the film where he starts reciting passages from the Bible, and I flash back to him doing the same thing from Ghostbusters. Now I want to go back and see how many movies he's done that in, because now I'm feeling like that's a little bit of a Dan Aykroyd trope, which once again lends this film that Tarantino film. So if that wasn't Aykroyd's idea, if that was in the script to start with, bravo, which makes it feel, again, a lot like Pulp Fiction, because Giles had his own thing before he liked to kill somebody. Aykroyd's character is a lot of fun in this movie. He's brash, arrogant, antagonistic. Aykroyd
whacked out of his mind.
He's I don't do things. I consume them. I've got a nutritionist and all this stuff. He's taking all these drugs because I like how it shows you that all assassins are screwed up, because you have to be screwed up to take people's lives for a living. So they got to do different things to deal with that in their psyche. And he's putting together a stable of assassins. He wants to be the head dog of the assassin. He tries to make a good pitch for it and all. But Martin wants none of that. Martin is the lone wolf, as he says, I like the lifestyle. I mean, like, look at how I dress, the aesthetic and all this. But Aykroyd, he's in some ways, he represents all the things that Martin's been running away from, this sense of commitment and community, even if this is a gross community, like that nobody rational would want to be a part of. And so I just feel like he represents all of that stuff, the ugliest incarnation of everything that he wants nothing to do with. But that's still even in his chosen field of expertise. And the system will not take no for an answer. And if you're not with me, you're against me. So you've got to go.
Yeah. It's really interesting, too, is that I think what you're saying about the Bible verses is really interesting. I would like to know that as well. But, right after he says that Bible verse, Martin Blank is talking to Minnie Driver and her dad, and is trying to say, it's like, it's something I did, but I don't. And the follow-up line from that, from Dan Aykroyd's character, is perfect, because he's like, don't let him fool you, girl. He's a cold-blooded killer, just like the rest of us. But yeah, it really is. I think the other thing that's interesting is that you could almost say that Grosser is Martin Blank 20 years in the future if he doesn't get out of this. this.
When he's
You know?
become cynical, because like look at how Martin is now. Anytime he gets caught in an assassination, when he has to shoot the guy instead of poisoning him, when he gets caught with the body of Benny Urquidez, he keeps saying like, "It's not me. I'm an instrument. I'm not at fault. I'm not responsible. I have no morality." But he does have morality, because if you weren't worried about those things, you wouldn't have to profess it's not me.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is interesting, well, I'm going to save that for when we talk about John Cusack's character. But there's a line where you're talking about flexible morality. He talks about flexible morality in there. I definitely want to get into that one, because I thought that was just an incredibly good line to put in there for a couple different reasons. So, but yeah, I agree with you. Dan Aykroyd's character is great because Dan Aykroyd is great. Grosser. It's a great foil. It's a great mirror held up to Martin Blank. He drives the plot along very well. And there's even elements of the Ray character from Ghostbusters that Dan Aykroyd is so good at playing. That type of character who is fast talking, has all the technical information, just rattles it off like that. But that's another you can make fun of them as well. Yeah,
that's definitely another Aykroyd trope. If you look as far back as SNL, when he would do like those little infomercial bits, if you look
at and all that stuff.
if you look at 1941, when he gets conked on the head and they're trying to get him, like, Sarge, tell us how to run the tank, and Aykroyd likes to do this really rapid fire, talking off specs and facts, and he starts talking about like, okay, here, how do we load the tank, and then they're like, oh God, he's talking about like a washing appliance. Crap, he really likes doing that sort of thing. So that's one of his tropes that's again worked into the film here.
Yeah, and it's really good. And this is a character you wouldn't think that Dan Aykroyd would fit as an assassin, and a really brutal assassin, but he does. He really does. He really fits into this character
There's one scene in particular I like. It's like when we see him dealing with Martin. He's super aggressive, like, oh, if you're not going to be against me. I love the tension between them whenever they're meeting and they're not on board with each other. They're always like hands in the coats, just ready to go. That any wrong move and they're going to start shooting each other. When he's with his cohorts, he's clearly in charge. He's the boss. But then we get one scene of him at home in his safe space. He's on his computer, and then he finds out that the client has decided to pull them off the contract and put Blank on, and he's like offended. He's like, wait, what is this? And like all that bravado that he puts out in public is gone, and now he's like, his feelings are kind of hurt. He's a little bit offended, like, well, that son of a bitch, like, and gets on the phone like, we got something about this.
He seems like a lot less manic character in his safe space as well, because that is the one thing. That's another thing. I was talking about that dark mirror held up in front of John Cusack's character, in front of Martin. Well, John Cusack is almost like the exact opposite in his delivery from Dan Aykroyd. John Cusack is a guy who always delivers each of his lines with not slowly, but with very measured pace. Sometimes he'll pause for effect a lot of times. And so when they're talking, this chemistry between the two of them, and that meeting you're talking about where he's telling me he's got to join up with the union, you've got fast-talking Aykroyd, and then you got very cautious and deliberate Martin Blank, and the juxtaposition of the two is just incredible. Really great on screen. Really, really good. Okay, let's get into the first of two characters that are kind of the opposites that we were talking about. Let's get into Alan Arkin's psychiatrist. Dr. Oatman. Now, Dr. Oatman, for me, is he's that classic high-priced psychiatrist. I'm not going to say that he's a quack or not good at everything, but he's very much into, there's a line where he's like, take a deep breath. And he's like, say, this is me breathing. It's like that kind of psychiatry, and you can, but however you want to feel about it.
That all feels like lip service to me because he's terrified.
Yeah, and that's the greatest part, is that right when we meet Dr. Oatman, the very first thing we find out is that Dr. Oatman doesn't consider himself Martin Blank's doctor. He doesn't want to be his doctor. He's scared to death of him. And there's a line that I wanted to mention before I kick it over to you that's so great. because he's like, I'm not your dog. I'm emotionally involved with you. And then it's Martin Blank starting to interrogate, how are you emotionally involved with me? He's like, you didn't tell me what you did for 4 sessions. He's like, I know the law. He's like, you can't report it. And if you did, if I did tell you something, you're going to report it. I know where you live. And he's like, well, that's not very nice. Now I feel threatened, And he's like, and it leads this whole thing, Martin just so casually threw out this threat, and it is a real threat. And then that's when,
joke, but it's obviously a threat.
Yeah. And then right after that, Martin Blank follows it up by trying to excuse who he really is by saying, I wouldn't kill you because most of the people that I kill, you have to do something for me to bring you to your door. Yeah. And so, just absolutely brilliant. And they I think they only talked like 3 times in the entire movie, you know.
But we've got to look at the seriousness of the threat, even though Martin says he's joking. Look at what happens when Joan Cusack is closing down the office. And he calls her up and he's like, is the office closed? And she's like, yeah. He says, I'll find you later. And she's like, why?
Yeah.
Because that is what happens when you deal with a killer.
Yeah.
That's
not only that.
And no matter what your relationship is.
Well, now that you brought that up, I got to bring out another thing. And this kind of ties into John Cusack character, but we're right there. So it's a great point to bring up is that when he goes home and he's talking to the clerk, he goes, where do you live? He's like, who's your manager? Where does he live? And it's like, it's obvious, he is asking because he's going to go kill somebody, so now you're like, those threats are real, So.
Yeah, you are here working where my house used to be.
Yeah. And he's like, where do you live?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but to go back to Oatman, I think Oatman is just incredible because let's be honest, Martin is using this poor man. To deal with the situations that he can't deal with on his own. And he's forcing Oatman to sit there and listen to this stuff. And it's really what it is Martin Blank talking to himself.
Yeah. I mean, this is very much the scenario that we'd see play out in long form in The Sopranos brilliantly, where a psychiatrist is being held hostage basically by a very dangerous and violent person, and they're a right to be afraid.
I never thought of that before, but you're absolutely correct. It is the exact same relationship as Tony Soprano and
all the, normally a psychiatrist is a figure of some authority because you're coming to them for help, but in this dynamic, all of the power is on Martin's side, and egregiously so, overwhelmingly so, and the doctor knows it, and Martin won't acknowledge it. And so, this poor guy is doing the best he can. He's terrified. And it's so funny to listen to Martin talk about, like, I want this relationship to work, this process to work. The doc, he's like, there's no process. I'm terrified of you. And so he just starts he starts throwing the pablum at him, like, breathe. I am here. I'm breathing. Try not to kill anybody this weekend. Yeah, I think you should go out of town. Please, go out of town and give me a few days peace.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now that you point that out, definitely he's not trying to help him at all. He's just trying to give him anything so he can get him off the phone,
Yeah.
And then at the end, Martin Blank ends up firing him, and it's like he's just like, get off my answer, get away, fine, fire me.
So funny. It's so funny to me because my takeaway, he's so angry that he called him up to say that he fired him after he was trying to get rid of him. And the thing that still gets me is this guy is going to be waiting weeks, months, maybe years, wondering if Martin is going to show up in his bedroom with a pistol.
Yeah.
And he still got to live with that fear for X amount of time before he finally decides, like, I guess he's not actually going to kill me.
Yeah. At which point he probably shows up, if he hasn't changed. So, yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. Which, so then let's back into the other character who is genuinely scared of her employer, even though she's insane herself, which is, what is her name again? Marcella. Marcella is Martin Blank's receptionist, is played by Joan Cusack, who is John's, I think, older sister.
I believe so, yeah. And she played it brilliantly. I think this is the first, maybe the only time they've been on screen together. I can't remember another movie where they've shared screen time.
They've been in the same movies. there is one other movie completely the opposite of this one. They were on the same screen in 16 Candles.
Oh wow, way back in the day. Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, I can't think of any other ones. So,
but they have such, and I don't know if it's just the familial connection or what, but like they have such great chemistry together, even though they're never actually on screen at the same time. They're not in the same space,
mm-hmm.
or did they share a space in one scene? But they all of their interaction is mostly through the phone. And
when Martin comes back to the office,
yeah, he comes back to the office one time,
mm-hmm.
but they play so well off each other. It makes you wish they would do more projects together.
Yeah,
because she's every bit the actor he is. Like, she's a genius, he's a genius. They're so good.
And Joan, just like John, has this very deliberate way of delivering her lines.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know what it is about Joan Cusack though, but she's very good at playing characters that creep you out because you see an underlying psychosis in them. You know, it's like even I mean, this is just a pure comedy, but look at the character she played in Addams Family 2. You know?
Yes. Oh God, so good in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I've enjoyed her work in films like My Blue Heaven with Steve Martin, and of course Toys with Robin Williams. She's just a wonderful, wonderful actress. Like, she's just one of my favorites. She's so involved, so deep in her portrayal. Yeah. And like you said, when she wants to turn it up to creepy, it's not something I would have thought of Joan Cusack before I saw stuff like that. Just as, like, you don't expect Dan Aykroyd to play a ruthless killer, but he's good at it.
Well, I mean, and she could, the range of emotion that Joan Cusack can bring, she can bring it all. I think of another movie she played where she can bring you that emotional distress so well, and she does it great in this movie. Another funny movie, but her performance and her range of emotion that she brings out is not just comedy, which is In and Out with Kevin Kline. And she's a jilted bride and In and Out, because Kevin Kline ends up finding out he's gay. And if you haven't ever seen that movie, you know, Bob Newhart is in it. Unbelievably good movie, funny as hell. Tom Selleck is in it. Just go see In and Out. You know, another movie we should talk about sometime.
What really a fabulous window treatment! Oh, that was, damn it!
Oh, my favorite line is the self-help tape. It's like, and he's trying to get him not to dance. He's like,
yeah. Well, that was like that line is from the self-help tape too, where he's like telling like say, "Damn, great truck!
Oh, that's right.
What a fabulous window trim!" He goes, "What a fabulous! Ah, that was a trick." It's like, God damn it!
There's some great. I mean, we should have done this. You know, another great movie in that vein. Birdcage.
Yeah,
Never seen Birdcage. See Birdcage.
And check out the original French version as well, La Cage aux Folles.
Yeah.
La Cage aux Folles.
Yeah. Nathan Lane and Robin Williams are just incredible in Birdcage, but another one of my favorite movies. So that's Joan Cusack's character. Now, next I wanted to talk about. Okay, so we got two big characters. We got John and Minnie Driver. So let's talk about Minnie Driver's character, Debbie Newberry. The first thing I'm going to say about Minnie Driver's performance in this is that this is one of the first things I had ever seen her in.
Oh.
And when I saw her do an interview, and she has one of the thickest Australian accents you will ever see. And normally when a foreigner is doing an American accent, I'm sure it's the same on other sides, you could pick it off. Her accent work in this movie is impeccable and on point. I honestly believe she was American and was surprised that she wasn't when I found that out. So she's incredible. Debbie Newberry's character is interesting because she's supposed to be the catharsis for Martin Blank, and she is, but in a different way than he thought. He thought he would come back and he would be able to just stay himself and then reconcile with her. And what Debbie Newberry's character does is force Martin Blank to look in the mirror and realize he's broken and realize what he needs to do. But at the same time, I want to talk about this when we get to John, but I think the ending of the movie is a little bit nebulous because I think Debbie moves a little bit in his direction. So it's like, as they are getting out of town, I'm kind of curious to hear what you think, what their future is once they left town. So,
just for clarification, she's English, not Australian.
Oh, English. I thought she was Australian. All right.
Yeah,
well, shows what I know.
English, and her accent's pretty darn flawless. I think there's only one time, and just maybe 2 words in a line that it sounded like she slipped by accident.
Mm-hmm.
But it's barely noticeable. But I just have been like, oh, did I hear a little bit of her actual voice? But yeah, she's so good at doing the American accent. And she's
she did the. It was a little. She did pretty well at Family Opera too, playing the Italian diva. So.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. such a terrific but small role, but I loved her in it. The interesting thing about Debbie is, and part of the point of this film is there's a lot of wounded characters in this movie. There's obviously people who've got all sorts of problems, all sorts of hangups, all sorts of troubles. You find out her dad is in his own trouble. He had to turn state's evidence. Obviously, Blank's mother, father, serious troubles there. As you meet his classmates, you learn that several of them are damaged. But there are those who you don't get to see any of their flaws. But that's just the way life is, Like what's the old saying about life? Nobody gets out of it alive. We all end up with our bruises and scars along the way. And so here's a woman who didn't get jilted at the altar so much, but she talks about their unbelievable chemistry as high schoolers. Now, when you're in high school, your emotions are so heightened because you're going through all these hormonal changes. Everything is bigger than it will ever be the rest of your life, and until you get married or you have your first child. Those emotional impacts are so much greater than anything else. But while you're in high school, you think the world hangs on every single thing you do. And she expresses how she is left kind of at the altar, if you will, on her doorstep wearing a $700 prom dress. That's how important this was to her, that she had this whole future planned out, that she and her dad were willing to go into this expense of a $700 prom dress for this is going to be the guy. And that has left an indelible mark on her. The fact that she got married and it fell apart in the 10 years since he's been gone. And she just kind of rebound into it. You get the feeling. And her response to seeing him is the first thing she does is she kisses him passionately. When what you figure she should have done is slap the ever-living crap out of him right away. And she saves that for later on in the movie. But even though she takes the time to castigate him on the air, she was still a lot kinder than I would have expected for somebody who's been dealing with 10 years of heartbreak. And the fact that hanging on to that sort of thing for so long is destructive. And it's definitely had an effect on her, because if you look at her in this sort of context, everybody knows her, but she interacts at a distance, kind of like the way a lot of us do now via the internet. She's on a radio show where she doesn't have to be face to face with somebody, where she's calling in and talking about people's days and their problems and things like that, asking their opinions, and they're getting a little bit of her, but it's not the sort of interaction that she needs. So in her own way, she's ended up running away as well. And it seems that she has to be healed up too.
On that point, I think you're absolutely right. Later on, we find out that Debbie was married and got divorced, and Martin asked her about that, and she basically says something to the effect of, "I got married as an escape."
Yeah,
and it's like, yeah, and you're right. It's like everybody in here is a little bit broken in one way or another, and it's kind of what I wanted to, when we get to, this movie translate to a modern audience, I wanted to hit on that for myself a little bit about the larger messages about what it's like out of high school and how people change and those types of things. But I think you're absolutely right. Is that Debbie has broken herself, and to be honest, we're led to believe that it was Martin that broke her, but I think there's a little bit of that as well, because there's obviously something. I think there's a message here about this kind of suburban living, in the 80s and everything, and how it looked idyllic, but everybody had their problems,
right?
So.
When you're a kid, you look, your dad's a superhero, but as you grow up, you find out he's got feet of clay. And life
Right.
is like that in general. So when you look at people like the Mercedes salesman, and even many people who are still living for that high school past, it's no good for you, even though you can't stop the progression of life. And I agree that you're right. By the end of the film, she has to come around to his way of thinking a little bit, just as he has to come around to her in order to leave his thing behind. She's got to accept his past if she wants him. And she actually makes that line as they're driving off into the sunset, if you will, in the sort of this radio voiceover, like, what should I do? And like, sometimes I think you've just got to accept.
Yeah.
And that's what she does. She accepts.
And get out of town. So,
yeah.
I mean, really, it really is interesting. And it's funny too, because, Grosse Pointe is not, it's not a super wealthy area, but a lot of these people are doing pretty well for themselves,
$700 prom dress.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that it's set in that type of environment, so, and I think that's done on purpose as well, because this really is, middle America, a nice suburb, and yet everyone there still has their own problems, and one of the people there had so many problems that it turned into a contract killer.
Yeah, and it leads again into that sort of Heather sort of situation where these are people who are, if they're not affluent, they're at least pretty well off. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you that there's no utopia, no paradise on this earth. There's nothing that you cannot find that has been stained. You can make the best of it as you can, but nothing right. is flawless here, and you have to accept, and sometimes go to a different area to see a different thing, as she does in the end.
So that's a great segue right into Martin Blank, John Cusack. And we've talked a lot about him through, so far in this pod. But one of the things that I don't think that I've mentioned that I think John Cusack brings to this role, which is brilliant, which is a lot of times when John Cusack plays characters, I think of two examples right off the top of my head. 2012, I think, which is a disaster movie. But he's good in that movie, even if the movie's a little over the top or a lot over the top. And then another movie he's in, Say Anything, a couple other ones, even one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Better Off Dead. Yeah.
Yes.
He always has the same kind of
I want my $2.
Yeah, personality and delivery to his characters, even if they are different characters. He was in Con Air, same thing. But one of the things that really stands out in performance here is that underneath it all, somehow, because he's such a talented actor, he gives you a sense of menace. You always believe underneath this likable, easygoing, personable character that there is a guy underneath there who will kill you for money. And it really, that menace is in every scene he's in. Period.
It's like you said, like we recognized it instantly when he starts asking the poor cashier where you live, and the casual throwaway line of the doctor, I know where you live. Even though you like him as a character, despite of what he does, and they, in a way, they sort of set him up as. It's very clever the way they set him up as a good guy, because he is hitting a hitter in his opening scene. He's taking out an assassin, but
it's true. I never thought of that.
We start to feel a little good about him. We're like, oh, okay, he's a little bit of a hero.
And then he turns down.
We see him trying to kill a guy in his sleep.
Yeah,
which is the complete antithesis of that.
But then they flip it on us again because Marcella gives him an offer and he turns it down because the French want him to take out a Greenpeace boat.
Yeah.
So
his talk about that flexible morality you want to talk about, because he's constantly spouting off lines like that. It's like, I would never kill an animal. The dog was just acting on instinct. So he has his own sort of code, and we've talked about this here, and it's sloppy spoilers before about having codes. But his code, it's hard to justify his code. His code is just as flexible as his morality, and he even says when he's looking in the mirror, he's like, "Hey, I'm Martin Blank. I'm doing this, and if somebody paid me enough money, I'd blow your brains out." And he's starting to realize that about himself at that moment. He's like, "I really am a contract killer. I can't hide behind this false veneer of morality that I've conceived for myself."
That is a great line. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. It's when Debbie finds him again after she saw that he had killed somebody, and he finally makes that admission to himself that given enough money, he'd kill anybody, or he would have killed anybody. Prior to that.
And then he's going to do it. He opens up the envelope. All right, you handsome devil. He's going to open up the envelope, and then he finds out who it is, because he's about to go on the path of being.
Spoilers, everybody. This is a big spoiler. Jeff, go ahead and reveal who the person in the envelope is.
He's supposed to kill Debbie's dad, of all things. He's there because he's a state witness. He's supposed to take him out, and now all of a sudden he's got to deal with the fact that it's like, because he was going to take the job, because his redemption is gone, Debbie's gone, and you can see him eventually ending up either being Grosser or maybe even joining Grosser if he's lost all hope of keeping true to himself.
And so the line that I parodied at the beginning, or paraphrased at the beginning, both Dan Aykroyd, Grosser's character, and Martin Blank at almost the same time say that the reason he's not killing Debbie's dad is because he either has a newfound respect for life or he's in love with his daughter, And it's like, that's the real question. That's the real question even at the end of the movie. Has Martin Blank really changed and have a newfound respect for life? Or is she changing because he's in love with her? Or the third option is, are both true? And you kind of have to make up your own mind as a viewer, is that, did Martin Blank really change and have a newfound respect for life? I'm pretty sure he's in love with Debbie, but
I don't think he has really that newfound respect for life so much. There is something I thought they were setting up in the film, and I kind of wish they had paid it off, but it would have changed the whole movie. I do like the way the movie ended, because I do like a redemption story. I do like a happy ending, but this would have suited the film, being a black comedy. When he's giving her a gun to protect herself and her father while they're hiding out in the bathtub, and she's asking him like, "Oh, how do I work the gun?" He shows her. One, I thought she might actually shoot him right there. And then later on, after he's killed Aykroyd and all of his goons, he comes upstairs. He doesn't announce himself. He opens the door and she fires at him and almost hits him. I thought I was expecting it before it happens. Like, she's going to shoot him in the face, and that's how we end the movie. And I actually would have been kind of fine with that, because
wouldn't it have been interesting if he did that and then it just went blank?
Yeah. Because I also have a thing where, like, as much as I love a redemption story, and I believe that everybody can be redeemed, I also like stories where people pay for their misdeeds, and he's got a lot to pay for.
Yeah. So, unless you have more that you want to talk about, but Martin Blank in specific, let's get right into, does this movie translate, and our overall thoughts of the movie and stuff. One of the things for me, okay, first of all, I'm going to say, I think this movie absolutely translates to modern audiences. I think the themes in here are timeless. There's things that everybody's going to deal with as they grow up and get older, about you can never go home again, and the weirdness it is as you get older, as you meet people, friends from your past. Do you still have things in common with people you were friends with in high school? All of those themes are here. Plus, everybody has a certain crisis of identity at different times in their life, just like what Martin is going through. It just happens he's an assassin, and it's an interesting story and all the stuff going on. But So I think that this movie absolutely translates to modern audience. I think that modern audiences would still get the humor. The music is great, and people love 80s music, just everything about it. The question I have is the ending. And we talked about that a little bit. I agree with you. I don't think that he's found newfound respect for life. I still believe that he will kill somebody if he needs to, you know?
Absolutely.
So my question is Debbie is gone with him. They're going to have this relationship. And I'm kind of like, I don't feel real good about their future, about where they're going, you know? I really don't. I think that they're in love, but I don't think Martin has the ability to do anything else than what he's doing. And it's almost like, yes, he's gotten him a new connection with humanity. I think that he might be even a more principled serial killer, you know, because that's what he is. But I think he's going to find Marcella again, and he and Debbie are going to set up shop somewhere, and he's still going to be contract killing. That's my thought on the end.
I'm not a psychopath. I kill people for money. There's a difference.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, you know, right there, you know, first, you know, let me know how you think if the movie translates to modern audiences. And then what do you think about the end of the movie? What the future of those two will be?
There are three things for me that date the film that I noticed while I was watching it. The corded phones, the music, and the big-ass TV that's used to kill Dan Aykroyd in the end. But other than those three things, nothing else jumped out at me. And these are obviously just cosmetics because the situations all very much translate. Other than those three things that you can see as artifacts of a past age, the movie feels very timeless, and I think that was done purposely. It definitely feels like it, and if not, it was very well crafted because the best movies are the ones that you can make as timeless as possible. Some directors and writers make the point of not making the setting of a movie in a real place, or never naming the city, sort of things like that, so you can always feel like it's happening in your city. I really appreciate that sort of thing because being an audience member, we are enjoying this vicariously. We are living these emotions and these situations through these characters. A good character in a good movie, you can't help but sort of feel yourself being kind of superimposed into the situation. Oftentimes, and maybe it's just the writer in me, I will literally put myself in these situations as a thought experiment. Like, how would I have reacted to that? How would I would have done that? What would I have done in these situations had I similar situations and skill sets and all that sort of thing. So I do think the movie is very timeless in its approach, and I think if those who have seen it remember it well and remember it fondly, and we don't look back on it as any sort of archaic thing, it still is as potent now as the last time I watched it, which was probably about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good. As for how these two are going to end, Martin might have changed. He's changed to a degree. He's definitely changed. He is still a killer. I don't know what else he can do with himself. He's not finding satisfaction in killing. He's not finding satisfaction in killing for money. But what else can he do with himself? I don't know what he can find that's going to satisfy him. He's not going to be a house husband.
Well, let's just to throw in to put an exclamation point on your mark real quick. When he mentions the fact, when he's being truthful with Debbie in that one scene, he says, "It's something I did. It's something I do." You say, "You fool yourself. You do it this. You say you're good at it. You were trained to do it, but the fact is you like it." And he admits that. He's like, "I like killing people."
But there's the crux. He doesn't actually like it anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise, he'd still be going on. So he's at a real crossroads because he no longer likes it. He no longer has the enjoyment or the passion for it. Not even as a professional doing a good job. I took that guy out quick and clean, that sort of thing. And nothing like that. All of that's gone. You'll notice when he has his conversations on the phone with his two hits that get botched, one because of Aykroyd one because he's going through his own existential crisis. When he botches those, again, he always, it's not me. It wasn't my fault. The research said his sleep patterns are going to be this. That doesn't matter. None of that matters. I couldn't foresee that. That doesn't matter if you're a professional. Nobody's going to accept that. And he's unwilling to take blame. Now that he's finally willing to take blame, my big question is, what is Martin going to do with himself? And whatever he decides is going to determine how their relationship goes. She is right now in this Cinderella phase where she's gotten her Prince Charming. She's Sleeping Beauty. It's taken longer than she thought it was going to be. She's learned some horrible things. And the unfortunate problem with a lot of women, and this is not meant as a slight, it's just a known psychological fact of women. Women like to fix men. And he is the ultimate fixer-upper right now. But can he be fixed? I mean, completely fixed. The really, truly integrated into society fixed. I don't think so. So I'm like you. I don't have high hopes for this.
I could see him best case scenario, ended up becoming like some sort of private security or, or something like that.
Consultant like that, yeah. That'd be his best option.
But I could definitely see him slipping back into it one way or the other. Best case scenario for that would be he would fool himself into saying, I'm going to go do it for the government.
I mean, imagine how ironic that would be if he does become this security firm and he's essentially doing what Grosser does. He has a group of mercenaries that he hires out. He knows people are being killed because he set it up, but he can potentially distance himself because I'm not the one pulling the trigger anymore.
Yeah. Or honestly, like I said, I could see him going back and doing it for the government, and then Debbie fooling herself into it's okay because now it's given a veneer of
it's sanctioned,
Yeah. So, but it is really interesting, and the fact that it's left out there nebulous makes us think about that. So it's good. It's like a lot of times. One of the things I struggle with is when a movie or a book ends, I want to know the rest of the story, but sometimes it's good not to give the rest of the story. It's one of those writer things. So
sometimes it is better to just ponder, and then we get to have things like this where we get to discuss.
Yeah.
There's lots of great fiction out there, be it movies, TV, books, where as fans we've debated the ins and outs and the possibilities for decades, and it's kind of wonderful being able to do so.
Yeah.
Even if you miss the satisfaction of having the definitive end.
Yeah. It's kind of like one of the things that was, I appreciated it, but it kind of cut off all further, storytelling that we could do for ourselves or thinking about it. Two instances. One is the end of Harry Potter, where J.K. Rowling gives the epilogue that let us know what happened with all the characters. And the other is the end of Lord of the Rings, where he wrapped it all up by having Frodo leave and told us exactly what happened with everybody. And it's like, it's nice to know, but at the same time, part of you wants to speculate on what could possibly have happened. So
now there's, just to get off track just a little bit, there is Tolkien had kind of sort of been in the process of writing a sequel to The Lord of the Rings. And as a fan, I've got to say, I'm kind of glad he didn't, because of the lineage of the evil from Morgoth to Sargon. I don't see there being an evil to follow up, because it's Lord of the Rings is a very Christian tale. And then, Jesus comes back and God claims the earth and the good guys win. And if you take it in that sort of biblical allegory, it needs to wrap up that way. If that's what his ambition is.
Have you ever read the notes and stuff for the next?
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, the sequel was supposed to be really, really dark, and it was like about almost like devil worshippers and human sacrifices, and just it really would have put a different spin on everything that was going on.
Yeah, I think because he had conflicts even with making the orcs evil, because being Christian, he's like, well, nobody's irredeemable, but he needed somebody that the heroes could kill without having to express a lot of sympathy for or have regret over.
Yeah.
And so he kind of trapped himself there.
Definitely. There was something else I wanted to bring up. There was like a running. Oh, one of the things I wanted to talk about when it comes to dating this movie, there is one running joke that seems a little dated, but I still think it holds pretty true for now, which is throughout the whole movie, he keeps seeing people's cars or whatever, and they're all foreign cars in Detroit. And he's like, what, nobody buys American anymore?
Because that was such a big thing in the 80s, you know, like buy American, like when America was kind of at its peak capitalism.
and knowing, and I knew people that grew up in Detroit. I mean, driving a foreign car in Detroit was a capital offense at one point. You know, it's like you just didn't do it. You know, you did not. You were a real jerk if you were driving anything other than an American car in Detroit. And so
it's like you said before, this was a nice stab at like suburban living, but it was a nice stab at the culture at the time too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a little dated, but at the same time, we're kind of going through that again. We're kind of going through, you know, it's like, it's a constant theme. So I do think it's kind of a timeless theme, is this idea of balancing, you know, you want to support your country, but you want to get a good car. You want to get a good, you know, whatever it is you're doing. So it's always interesting. So, all right, cool. All right, that was a great discussion. Final rating for the movie. What would you rate the movie? Out of 10.
Rate it out of 10? Let's see. I'm going to rate this one pretty high. Like you said, it did slow down a bit in the second act before reaching the climax. So I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10. Cool. It was mostly very satisfying. Watching it again, I realized it's still one of my favorite movies to watch. The actors are great. The direction was great. As far as cinematography goes, it was well shot, but not the punchiest thing ever. And that might be just because, you know, I've gotten used to like just incredible visual auteurs these days. We have so many directors who are like super visual, even if the story isn't always there. So this isn't the most visually well-constructed thing, even though I think it's filmed pretty well. But yeah, overall, it leaves me feeling very satisfied, even in its ambiguity at the end. So I'm going to go 9 out of 10.
Yeah. I think the writing on this movie is the strongest thing, but that's followed by a close second by the performances. The cast of this movie is absolutely incredible. Dan Aykroyd, Alan Arkin, Minnie Driver, all just really good. Like you said, the cinematography, it was fine. It was professional. It did slow down a couple points, but I really enjoy this movie still. I think it's a great movie to sit down, and it gives you a lot to think about, but you can also sit down at times and just turn your brain off and watch it as well. Yeah. So I would give it an 8.5, only because, you know, it's not a cinematic experience like a Braveheart where it's just like, oh my God, what am I taking in? But it's a really, really good fun movie. So together that would average 8.75. It's a little bit higher than what IMDb has. Now, but
I could be biased having graduated in 87, and this is their 86 was their graduation. So I was right there.
And I very much, I'm the same way. I'm a couple years after that. So it just, to me, it resonates. And when I watched it, I remember the first time I watched it, I was kind of going through some of kind of this stuff at around the same time, you know? So it was, as far as like, you're dissatisfied with what you're doing, but you're 10 years out. So it's like, you feel like you're kind of trapped in what I mean, there's all these messages in there that you find when you grow up, you know, once you get in a career, you're like, can I start a new career, or am I kind of like trapped in it's all there. So really good. But I do think I have a little bit of that nostalgia, you know, upgrade for this movie as well. But I think it's still a movie that anybody could enjoy. So
yeah,
cool. All right. Well, this was really fun. This was really great. I'm not sure what we're gonna do next. I'm tempted to go straight from this and go Jeremy Piven and go PCU.
Love PCU
for the next one. Yeah. So I'm tempted to do that. We'll see. or we might go back to a cinematic experience and then get back to movies like this, because I want to do a mix of both. So I'm not sure what we're going to bring in 2 weeks, but we will be back in 2 weeks for another episode of Cinema Crusaders. I want to thank Jeff so much for joining me and talking this movie. Always great. You always bring all the information. Thank you so much, Jeff, for hopping on the podcast.
Absolutely my pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
Cool. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Please hit like and subscribe down below on the video if you're watching this on YouTube. Send us comments on Twitter or YouTube or wherever. Let us know if you've got a comment or a suggestion for a movie you'd like us to cover. As long as it's 10 years old, send it in and we'll check it out. We'll look at it. I also want to throw this up again. Jeff Bracey's doing commissions. Bracey 100 at DeviantArt. So if you need a great commission and you want some artwork, check that out. Come check it out. And on behalf of myself and Jeff for Comic Crusaders and Cinema Crusaders, I want to say thank you. We're out.
Bye, everybody.